Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا وقدوتنا محمد عليه أفضل السلام وأزكى تسليم. اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزيدنا علما يا رب العالمين. Today is the 31st of October, the first frost of the year. And it is Saturday night, and we are talking about the names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Last class we talked about Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, and we talked about Al-Hayy, Al-Qayyum. And today, inshallah, we will talk about Allah's characteristics and qualities relating to His ability to create. We'll start out with the author, Abdul Razak Al-Badr. He splits it over 2 chapters. And as you've probably noticed, he groups names. He doesn't just give every name has its own individual chapter. He kind of groups names around a theme or a concept or a relationship. So we have one chapter which is Al-Khaaliq, Al-Khallaaq, right? And then we have the chapter after, which is Al-Khaaliq, Al-Baari, Al-Musawwir. So we'll try to get through at least these 2 chapters today, inshallah. So Allah is Al-Khaliq and Al-Khallaaq. Khalaqa, the root in Arabic, means to create. It also communicates or implies a plan and a purpose, kind of a measuring up before the implementation or the actual creation. So when Allah describes Himself as Al-Khaliq on the wazn or on the pattern of fa'il, the doer, that means that therefore Allah is the one who creates. And when Allah describes Himself as Al-Khallaaq, which He does twice in the Quran, this is called Sigha Mubalagha. This is one of the patterns in the Arabic language that indicates intensity and repetition and excellence or a higher degree of something, right? Similar to a chapter that's going to come soon, Al-Raziq, Al-Razzaq. So if you're thinking, what's the difference between these 2 things? This is a linguistic, these types of names fall on linguistic patterns. Anything that's on the pattern fa'il, khaliq, raziq has to do with the simple kind of doer, just like we add er in English or other suffixes, the one who does something. And then there are other patterns that go beyond that. Khallaq, fa'al lima yurid, right? Instead of fa'il, fa'al, khallaq, razzaq. What do we mean when we mean that Allah creates? Similar to the English, in Arabic, there are 2 primary meanings to the word or the concept of creation. The first meaning has to do with bringing something into existence which had no prior existence or precedent. It didn't exist before. There was nothing like it. This is the type of meaning that Allah intends when He says, هل من خالق غير الله? Is there a creator other than Allah? This specific type of creation, which has to do with bringing about something without a prior likeness or pattern or example. This type of creation necessitates the purpose and the wisdom behind it. These kind of corollary concepts to Allah's creation. And that makes sense if we think about it for a second, because if someone is intentionally bringing forth something that hasn't existed before, nor has there existed any pattern or like thing or antecedent to that thing, then one would assume that it would require planning, measurement, and a specific and careful act of will, as opposed to the other meaning of create, which we'll talk about in just a moment. What is the purpose of the creation then? Specifically for our purposes, what is the purpose of our creation? This is something we talked about extensively in the Sunday class. Can anybody fill us in? Those of you who have been attending the Sunday class, somebody asks you, your teenage son asks you, why am I here? What's the purpose of creation? To just be yourself, right? Khilafa. Yes. To be a Khalifa, ibadah. Yes. Very good. Yes. Those are the two higher ones, right? And the first one was imara, which is just kind of our base subsistence. Good. And the two higher orders, or the two higher levels or purposes, ibadah. And if the person isn't content with ibadah, then they have khilafa. Khilafa is their destiny and the pinnacle of human purpose. Very good, mashallah. So this is the first meaning of to create, khalaqa, khaliq, to bring something forth which has no prior example, no prior pattern or precedence. The second meaning of the word is how we use it colloquially in English as well, which is kind of just to make something, whether it had a precedence or not, whether it had a prior pattern, whether it was imaginable before or not. So in Arabic, we have the same kind of two meanings but behind khalaq as we have in English when we say the word create. So this meaning, if we're going to pin it down with more specific words than simply to make, we could say to prepare, to assemble, to fabricate, to manufacture, right? These sorts of meanings. And this is the meaning behind Allah's statement, or I should say, this is the meaning behind the word Khaliq in Allah's statement. فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ. أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ. So here in this ayah, Allah is saying that He is the best of creators. We're going to get, that's a good question, Sheikh family. So here's the rub, okay? Here's the contradiction. I want you to solve the problem. We have, let's say your teenage son, again, is reading the Quran, and he comes across these two ayahs, and he says, wait a second, the Imam, he said in the khutbah on Friday that there's no contradiction in the Quran. But I found a contradiction, Baba. Allah said, هَلْ مِنْ خَالِقٍ غَيْرُ اللَّهِ? Is there a creator other than Allah? And then Allah also said, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنَ الْخَالِقِينَ. So blessed be Allah, the best of creators, which implies that there are more than one creator. And Allah just said, there is no creator other than Allah. How do you resolve this contradiction? Allah asks, is there a creator other than Allah? Rhetorical question, meaning no. And then Allah says, blessed be Allah, best of creators, meaning there are other creators out there. So the Shaykh family says, because Allah is the first creator, and He gives us the ability to create things, so we are maybe minor creators. In essence, yeah. In essence, yes. It's about these two meanings, right? To create, just like in English, in Arabic, it has two different meanings. The first is to bring about something with no precedence, or to bring about something from nothing, okay? It did not exist in the universe, boom, kun fayakun. Now it exists. And then there's this more general sort of creative ability, which is to manufacture, to assemble, to arrange, right? And this is something that is not specific, strictly speaking, to Allah. We create things in the sense that, you know, there wasn't an iPhone and we took, you know, minerals from the earth and alloys and plastics and we made the iPhone, right? It's not like the first meaning of Khaliq, because we're rearranging the atoms. We're taking the substances that Allah has already created and we're rearranging them, manipulating them, doing things to them, and making them work together in a slightly different way. In that sense of the word, there are multiple creators, and even then Allah is the best of them. But in the grand scheme of things, like the Shaykh family, we could not do that without Allah's having willed it, first of all. And second of all, Allah is the creator in the first instance because He brought about everything when there was a time when it didn't exist at all. Not the final product, even the parts that make up the final product. So what does Allah mean when He says that He is the best of creators? What makes Allah a better creator than people? What if you had someone that came up to you and said, you know, trees and rivers are nice, but man, this iPhone is just really convenient. Look at, you know, people, they're so genius, they're so brilliant. How can Allah claim to be the best creator when we've done all these things with technology? We can prolong people's lives, medicine, procedures. Aren't people better creators than Allah? What if someone were to say that to you? Look of how we've made improvements, right? You hear that language. We've made improvements upon human life and improvements upon the creation. You hear that. How will you respond to such a person? Okay, that's one way. A sort of like indebtedness and gratitude argument, right? That Allah gave us the raw materials and He gave us the intellect to do those improvements, so we wouldn't be able to do it. And that's echoed by the Shahada family. We wouldn't be able to do it without Allah's will in the first place. But I don't know if that responds as centrally and directly to what's being gotten at. Like that responds to things like in time. But it almost seems like Allah turned it over to us and then we did even better. What if someone is saying that? It's like, yes, we're grateful. We're thankful to Allah that He turned it over to us and gave us the ability to create so we could improve and make something even better. People believe this. Taught man what he knew not. Okay, that still comes under the indebtedness argument and the kind of gratitude Let's think about it this way. Are there any unintended consequences or externalities to the things that human beings create? Is there any waste? Let's go back to that iPhone. Yeah, definitely. Think about that iPhone. It may be convenient. It may let us keep track of things and do all these great things, talk and stuff like that. But what goes into an iPhone, right? You have to mine stuff from over here, and it's dependent upon the global supply chain. You've got internal combustion engines puffing smoke up into the air, harming the environment, making our air more difficult to breathe. Plastics that end up in the ocean, choking the fish, and all these sorts of things, right? Even if somebody is going to stand their ground and say, well, it's worth it, and say, like, in some sort of cost benefit analysis thing, like, okay, yeah, these things are unfortunate, but they're what we have to do in order to get this thing, which is really great. Nobody can deny that those are all unintended consequences. Those are all side effects, right? Those are all harms, right, that come along with this process of human creation. The internal combustion engine, even roads, right? Roads that break up patterns of animal migration. Even lights, street lights, which break up patterns of bird migration. The Adirondacks is one of the largest tracts in the United States of like a light sanctuary to protect birds' migratory patterns. A lot of people don't realize that, right? So I mean, like, there's so much of what we do and create that benefits us that actually has all of these negative consequences that we have to deal with. Even in the end of the day, if we decide that they're worth it, we have to own it. Okay, now look at Allah's creation. Look at the things that Allah created directly. Do we see this sort of waste? Do we see these unintended consequences? Do we see these drawbacks? Is it kind of like subject to the same cost-benefit analysis? Like the leaf, when the leaf falls in the autumn, is it trash on the ground that hurts other beings until whatever, it decomposes or somebody cleans it up or something like that? No, we find the exact opposite. It's actually like this closed loop system where there is no waste. Everything gets converted into a purpose towards something else. The leaf, when it's on the tree, is making the sugars for the plant to survive. And then in autumn, it drops. And then through the process of it becomes food for the earthworm. And then it becomes soil in the ground. And then it becomes a medium through which more trees can grow. There's no waste. There's no side effects. There's no consequences. Yes, exactly. So everything that Allah creates is like a closed system, right? Constantly being repurposed and constantly being reused, even if it's the nature of that use is changing. So when Allah says that He is the best of creators, it's not a contest. Like, you can look and see how efficient is the creation. Yeah, exactly. Until humans interfere. 100%. Yeah. So we see how Allah is the best of creators. He's able to create these bodies, right? Everything that we see. No waste, no negative side effects, no unintended consequences. He is the greatest creator. Whereas we bumble along, we make some shiny, cool stuff, but it has dramatic cost on the environment, and even on even the things that even if we ignore the environmental side effects, even the effects on our lives, like, everybody now is talking about smartphone usage and smartphone addiction and screen time and stuff like that. Like, this is This is it's not even a side effect. It's a direct effect of what we've created, right? So Allah is Ahsan al-Khaliqeen. When we're talking about Allah's ability to create, this is one of the it's one of the most commonly referred to qualities or attributes of Allah that he refers to in order to prove his uluhiyya, right? So his divinity or his exclusive right to be worshipped. Because whereas there might be some qualities that seem to exist among the creation, to create in this first meaning, this unique way, bringing something into existence that didn't exist before, is something so unique and so powerful that it is a very strong proof for divinity and for ownership, and thus the conclusion that Allah wants us to make, that nothing else deserves to be worshipped except Allah. So many times in the Quran, Allah draws our attention to the created world, not what we've made, not our kind of bumbling creations, but the things that he created directly: the sun and the moon, the stars, the rain, the earth, the vegetation, the animals, the mountains, all these sorts of things, and tells us to look at them and ponder them, and then conclude from that there is will, a singular intelligent will, and an enormous power behind this creation, which therefore deserves to be worshipped alone. Those are usually kind of the flow chart of ideas that Allah puts out in the Quran for us to follow. So that covers Al-Khaliq, Al-Khallaaq. The next chapter the author has is a pairing, or a trio, we should say, of names that happen at the end of Surah Al-Hashr, when Allah is kind of listing all of these names. Al-Khaliq, we just did. Al-Baari, Al-Musawwir. Al-Khaliq, Al-Baari, Al-Musawwir. These three, when they're paired, we're looking now at Allah's quality of creation through a different lens. Before, we were looking at how he is Khaliq, he creates, and how there are these two meanings of create, and he is able to do, one is completely unique to him, and the second, while not completely unique, he's the best at, okay? Now we're looking at it through the lens of kind of the stages of creation when Allah creates. When Allah creates something or wills something to be created, what are the steps that happen, spanning from the instant it is decided and willed to the instant that it actually becomes created? We can look at these three names and kind of cover that entire process: Al-Khaliq, Al-Baari, Al-Musawwir. So in this context, Al-Khaliq, as we did mention before, it refers to creation, but not just any aspect of creation, creating with purpose and wisdom. So it's a gesture towards the aspect of planning that is involved, and the wisdom that's involved behind it. Whereas Al-Baari refers to bringing something new and unprecedented into existence. So this is one of the meanings that we were talking about in the last chapter. Now we're talking about it specifically now as it does have its own name to achieve this specific aspect of Allah's creation. Al-Baari, he is the one who brings about into existence something that did not exist before. So it has to do with kind of the implementation of things. And the third, Al-Musawwir, has to do with Allah's shaping and sculpting of things. Okay, so we could imagine this as almost like the third stage. So we have Al-Khaaliq, the one who creates, or the one who plans and proportions, and Al-Baari, the one who then brings that thing about in a context and within a history where it never existed before. And then finally the taswir, the forming or the shaping or the molding of this thing. And this thing is formed and shaped and molded not haphazardly, but specifically in accordance to what it is created for. We talked about this when it came to human beings in the Sunday class. We talked about, for example, that human beings are primarily a potentiality, right? We don't have the advantages of the animal kingdom in some sort of sense, where we don't have, for example, claws or fangs. We don't have immense speed such that we can run away or outrun something like a deer, or we don't have the ability to fly, right, like birds, these sorts of things. What do we have? We have these kinds of tools. We have the tool of language. We have the tool of intellect. They're immense potentialities, but they're not quite yet realized. They require development. But once we develop them, then we have kind of reached this power or this capacity that other creations don't have. And how this is kind of, there's this appropriateness or this suitability. The fact that we are these potentialities and we're created, as we said earlier, for khilafah. Our higher purpose, our greater purpose is khilafah. It all kind of goes together. We need to begin on the path of self-development in order to kind of continue down the path of self-development to become Allah's representatives on earth. It all kind of goes together. Whereas, the things that are supposed to eat meat, right? They are given fangs and they are given claws. They are given strength. The things that don't have those abilities or those capacities, they are given something suitable to them. They are given great speed, or they're given, for example, you see eyes that are on the side of their head so that they can kind of look around and notice who's going to stalk them and sneak up on them so that they can run away, right? So everything, Al-Musawwir refers to, or it references Allah's shaping and forming everything in accordance with its purpose, what it was made for. And this is one of the strongest proofs of Allah's intelligent design and his intelligent will. That we don't see this kind of contradiction. We don't see something that has eyes on the side of its head and has claws and is kind of all over the place, right? Everything is kind of focused into a singular purpose. If you're a predator, you're a predator. If you're prey, you're prey. And there's a few omnivores, and that's not necessarily a contradiction to this general rule. But everything is kind of given the tools that it needs to have to survive. So again, these sorts of things, they come back to Allah's rububiyyah, his dominion and his unique control and ownership over the creation. And he uses them in the Quran to justify and bring along our intellects to the point where we conclude that because of this unique dominion, therefore this is unique divinity and it deserves to be worshipped alone. Allah's ability to create is also used as a proof of the resurrection. This is something extremely important. We had a khutbah a couple of weeks ago about the resurrection and what will be happening to us after we die. And for people who only view what they've experienced, it can seem like something that's hard to believe if they're only used to affirming the things that they're observation can grasp. What's the main argument that Allah uses against this mentality? He says, look, use your observation. Use your observation to see how I brought you about from nothing in the first place. And then posits the rhetorical question, if I brought you about from nothing in the first place, then how much easier is it to bring you back a second time after you've died and decayed? It's much easier. It's much harder to bring you about from absolutely nothing than it is to return you to an existence that you already had before. So when it comes to, sometimes we run into these names, we run into the issue of when is it appropriate to use these terms for people, right? So we have Al-Khaaliq, we have Al-Baari, we have Al-Musawwir. Let's say that, for example, Al-Khaliq means the creator. Is it appropriate to say that a human being creates? Is it appropriate to say that such and such a person is the creator of this program, or the creator of this work of art, or the creator of, I don't know, the iPhone 20, whatever we're on now? Is that something that's permissible in the Sharia to use this kind of terminology? So the Sheikh family says, if used with the understanding that we are lesser creators. Good. That's essentially what the author of our book says. And how do you communicate that understanding? He says by not using it absolutely, but using it conditionally. What does he mean by that? He means by not saying that anyone is just the creator, period, but saying the creator of this, the creator of that, right? And our author's opinion is that if you use such a phrase, then it's understood that you're not bringing it about from absolutely nothing. You're doing this process of manufacturing or rearranging. Yes, also a good point. Exactly, like master of the house. And that's what we're going to get into soon enough. Okay, good. So that's Al-Khaliq. What about Al-Baari? Is it permissible for anybody, if we say the initiator in this sort of, that's not really a very good translation, but we studied what Al-Baari means, to bring something out from nothing where it didn't exist before. Would it be appropriate to name a child, for example, Al-Baari, or to say that, oh, so-and-so is the Bari of this sort of thing? Of course, yeah, and there's no doubt. If any of these names, if we put Abd before it, it becomes permissible. Abd al-Bari, Abd al-Musawwir, Abd this. Of course, that's not what we're asking. We're asking, is it appropriate to use the actual word without using Abd? We just said that for Khaliq, it is appropriate if we pair it with something specific. Okay? And our author is of the opinion that this is not appropriate with Bari, because he says the meaning of Bari is this specific meaning of creation where you're bringing something that there was nothing like it before, not the meaning of rearranging, not the meaning of manufacturing. So our author's of the opinion that yes, you can use Khaliq, you can use the creator of this and that and the other if you specify something that is created, but you're not allowed to do it for Bari because it implies only this kind of creation in the first instance. What about Al-Musawwir, the shaper, the former? Can we call someone the Musawwir of something? Or can we just say Al-Musawwir, just like that? Yes, you've anticipated what Sheikh Abdul Razak says, Sheikh family. That's exactly what he says. Yes, good. Shahada family on the same page. Yes, so the author, Sheikh Abdul Razak, his opinion is that, yes, the same with Khaliq. You can't use it by itself. You can't say he is Al-Musawwir, but you can say he's the Musawwir of something. He's the shaper of this. He's the former of that. He's the molder of this or that or the other. Because then it's understood that what that person is doing is he's rearranging or he's forming this sort of material or this end product from what it was before, right? So very good. There's only a minute left. Does anybody have any final questions on Al-Khaliq, Al-Khallaaq, Al-Khaliq, Al-Baari, Al-Musawwir before we conclude? Ameen wa iyaakum. Thank you very much for your participation as always. Always a pleasure to share the same space, even if it's virtual. And we will see you again next time, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.